Hello everyone. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie hidden? Not just in classified documents, but physically buried beneath tons of rock. What kind of project would require disappearing billions of dollars into the earth, far from prying eyes, and capable of escaping detection even from orbit? Until now. Reports emerged late last week, circulating first through niche online forums dedicated to open-source intelligence and satellite analysis, before leaking into broader alternative news circles. The source, identifying themselves only as Project Chimera, posted a data package containing what they claimed were high-resolution satellite images and associated analytical data pointing to a previously unknown, massive underground military installation deep within the Rocky Mountains. The initial reaction was, predictably, a mix of extreme skepticism and frenzied speculation. The online world is awash with outlandish claims and misinterpreted data, but something about this leak felt different. The data wasn't just raw images. It included overlays, thermal mapping anomalies, historical comparisons showing subtle changes over decades, and even what purported to be multispectral analysis indicating unusual material compositions near a specific, highly restricted area. Geolocation data accompanying the files placed the potential site somewhere in a remote, mountainous region of Colorado, far from major population centers and adjacent to a vast tract of protected wilderness, though tantalizingly close to an existing low-profile military communication site established decades ago. The images themselves, once independent analysts began to scrutinize them, were initially underwhelming to the untrained eye. Just vast stretches of pine forest, rocky peaks, and winding mountain roads. But when specialized software was applied and historical satellite archives were compared, the anomalies started to become apparent. One set of images focused on a seemingly undisturbed mountainside. However, thermal imaging data captured on specific dates showed a consistent, elevated heat signature emanating from a particular point on the slope, inconsistent with natural geological activity in the area. This signature was not always present, suggesting intermittent operation or perhaps venting. Another set showed a remote, rarely used access road that appeared to have undergone significant, though heavily camouflaged, upgrades over the past 15 years, including reinforced culverts capable of supporting heavy loads and subtle widening in certain switchback sections. There were also faint ground disturbances visible in older satellite imagery, smoothed over in later years, suggesting large-scale excavation or tunneling activity that had been carefully concealed. Multispectral analysis of rock and soil samples. The source claimed these were obtained separately or interpreted from specific satellite bands sensitive to mineral composition. Near the potential site showed traces of materials not naturally abundant in the immediate vicinity, including specific types of concrete aggregates and metallic elements often used in heavy construction or shielding. The Project Chimera leak didn't just dump data. It provided a preliminary analysis document written in dense, technical language, attempting to interpret the findings. It speculated the facility was located hundreds, possibly even over 1,000 feet below the surface, using the deep geological stability of the Rockies as natural protection. The scale, based on the distribution of anomalies and the inferred required infrastructure, was described as extensive, potentially spanning several square miles underground. The document posited the facility was likely a command and control center, a secure data storage complex, or perhaps a highly protected research and development site for sensitive technologies. The sheer depth and scale suggested protection against even advanced conventional or tactical nuclear strikes, implying a strategic purpose tied to national continuity or long-term security objectives. The timing of the alleged construction activity, based on the historical image analysis, appeared to span from the late 1990s through the 2010s, a period of significant global uncertainty and technological advancement. The immediate challenge for the OSINT community was verification. Could these images be faked or manipulated? Could the thermal anomalies be natural? Could the historical ground disturbances be from something else entirely, like mining exploration? Though extensive geological surveys of the area didn't indicate significant mineral deposits or past unrelated military exercises, analysts from groups known for their rigorous verification processes, like Bellingcat or similar independent bodies, began cross-referencing the leaked data with commercially available satellite imagery from different providers: Maxar, Planet Labs, Sentinel-2, historical aerial photography archives, public geological surveys, seismic monitoring data, and even publicly available flight tracking data. While initial findings were cautious, the anomalies identified in the leaked data began to correlate with subtle but persistent patterns observed in these independent sources. For example, seismic data from stations miles away showed unusual, localized, low-magnitude seismic events that appeared cyclical, potentially consistent with large-scale underground machinery or blasting, that weren't catalogued as natural earthquakes. Thermal imaging from other satellites occasionally picked up faint, transient hotspots in the specified region. The sheer volume and technical nature of the data package, combined with the correlation across multiple independent data streams, started to shift the balance from outright dismissal to serious investigation. It wasn't a single smoking gun, but rather a constellation of faint signals, each individually explainable as something mundane, but collectively painting a picture of something extraordinary and deliberately concealed. The remote location, the known proximity to a low-profile military site, and the apparent multi-decade construction timeline all lent a degree of plausibility to the claims of a hidden base. The implications were enormous. If true, this represented a colossal, unacknowledged expenditure of taxpayer money, a significant piece of strategic infrastructure built in total secrecy, and raised profound questions about government transparency and accountability. It also hinted at potential threats the government perceived that would necessitate such an extreme measure for protection and continuity. The initial question echoing through forums and encrypted chat rooms was, what secrets are so vital? What threat is so profound that it justifies burying a facility of this magnitude deep beneath a mountain range, hidden even from the public eye it is ostensibly meant to protect? And who decided this was necessary, without any public debate or congressional oversight? This wasn't just about a base. It was about the hidden architecture of power and preparedness being constructed outside the public view. As the sun set on the digital landscape where these files first appeared, the conversation was only just beginning, and the implications for public trust and national security loomed large. What do you think is the most likely explanation for these kinds of anomalies in a remote area? A secret base? A natural phenomenon misinterpreted, or something else entirely? The process of verifying the Project Chimera data quickly became a distributed, collaborative effort involving analysts, researchers, and enthusiasts across the globe. Initial skepticism gave way to a focused, methodical investigation. Analysts downloaded commercial satellite images dating back several decades, pixel by pixel, comparing them frame by frame. Software designed to detect minute changes over time, typically used for monitoring environmental shifts or urban development, was repurposed to look for anomalies in the remote mountain landscape. One specific area highlighted in the leak was a secluded valley floor, seemingly untouched wilderness. However, analysis of images from the early 2000s revealed temporary clearings, faint track marks consistent with heavy machinery, and piles of excavated material that were subsequently meticulously covered and revegetated over several years. This level of deliberate concealment suggested an activity far beyond typical logging or mining exploration. The sheer effort put into making the landscape look natural again was a significant indicator. Further analysis delved into infrared and thermal spectrums. While the leaked data showed specific thermal anomalies, independent checks using different satellite platforms confirmed the occasional presence of unusual heat signatures in the area. These signatures were not static. They appeared on specific dates, sometimes in sequence, sometimes as single spikes. They were inconsistent with natural wildfires or geothermal activity. Known geothermal sources in the Rockies are well mapped and don't align with this location. Experts consulted unofficially described the signatures as potentially consistent with ventilation systems for a large underground complex, releasing heat generated by machinery, electronics, or environmental controls. The pattern of these emissions, intermittent and seemingly controlled, reinforced the idea of a deliberate operation. Electromagnetic, EM spectrum analysis added another layer of intrigue. While less accessible to public sources than optical or thermal imagery, some satellite platforms carry sensors capable of detecting unusual EM emissions. The leaked data included analysis suggesting localized EM noise inconsistent with natural sources or known above-ground infrastructure. Independent OSINT researchers with access to specific data feeds reported detecting unusual low-frequency signals emanating from the general area, though pinpointing the exact source and nature of these signals proved difficult. Speculation ranged from powerful communications arrays designed to penetrate deep underground to exotic power generation or research equipment. One compelling piece of circumstantial evidence emerged from analyzing flight patterns. Publicly available flight tracking data showed a peculiar lack of air traffic directly over the suspected area, particularly at lower altitudes, even for non-commercial or private flights that routinely cross similar remote regions. While controlled airspace exists, the extent of avoidance suggested either a highly sensitive above-ground facility, which wasn't visible, or awareness of activity below that posed a potential risk or required secrecy. There were also reports, difficult to verify, of increased helicopter activity in the broader region during the alleged construction period, with flight paths originating from or terminating at secure government airfields hundreds of miles away. Geological analysis of the specific mountain range in question provided further context. The Rockies are known for their stable, hard rock formations, making them ideal for deep underground construction protected from surface threats. However, such construction is incredibly difficult and expensive, requiring specialized drilling and excavation techniques. The estimated volume of material that would need to be removed for a facility of the scale implied by the anomalies was staggering, potentially millions of cubic meters of rock. The logistical challenge of removing and disposing of this much material secretly, even over 2 decades, was immense. Analysts hypothesized the material might have been processed and used as aggregate for the underground concrete structures, or transported out of the area under extreme measures of concealment, perhaps mixed with commercial quarry output elsewhere. The sheer scale of the inferred project raised questions about its purpose. A simple bunker wouldn't require this level of activity over such a long period. The long construction timeline suggested a complex multi-phase project, possibly involving different levels or specialized sections. Speculation among analysts coalesced around several plausible, within a realistic military context, functions. The lack of any public acknowledgement or record of a project of this scale added fuel to the fire. Major infrastructure projects, especially military ones costing billions, are typically included in budget documents, environmental impact statements, and public contracts, even if details are classified. The apparent complete absence of any trace in the public record suggested an extraordinary level of compartmentalization and secrecy, possibly funded through off-budget or black budget appropriations, bypassing standard oversight mechanisms. This aspect of the leak, the evidence of something massive being built in total secrecy, resonated deeply with public distrust of government transparency. The question wasn't just what was being built, but how such a colossal undertaking could remain hidden for so long, entirely outside the public eye and democratic process. The verification efforts, while not providing definitive proof of the base's function, were increasingly confirming the reality of large-scale, clandestine underground activity in the specified location. The initial skepticism was being replaced by a sober assessment. The data strongly suggested something significant was happening under that mountain, and whatever it was, the government desperately wanted it to remain hidden. As independent verification of the satellite anomalies solidified the case for significant clandestine activity beneath the Rockies, official silence became the loudest response. Initial inquiries to the Department of Defense, Northern Command, NORAD, Northcom, headquartered nearby in Colorado Springs, and other relevant agencies were met with standard no-comment responses, dismissals of the claims as speculation, or statements emphasizing the security of existing installations without directly addressing the alleged new site. This lack of a substantive denial or explanation only served to heighten suspicion. If the claims were entirely baseless, a swift and definitive refutation based on readily available public data, like geological surveys or lack of funding records, would have been expected. The carefully worded non-denials and the focus on investigating the source of the leak rather than the content of the data were interpreted by many as a tacit acknowledgement that there was indeed something significant to hide. Investigative journalists, spurred by the OSINT community's findings, began filing Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) requests related to the specific geographic area, historical land use permits, large-scale government construction contracts in the region, and environmental surveys. These requests were universally met with delays, heavy redactions under national security exemptions, or outright denials, citing classified programs or national defense concerns. While FOIA requests often face such hurdles for sensitive topics, the blanket nature of the refusal and the invocation of high-level security classifications for seemingly innocuous historical land data further fueled speculation that the area was indeed linked to a deeply secret program. Local reporting in the sparsely populated regions near the suspected site proved difficult. The area is remote, and long-term residents are few. Those who did live relatively nearby were often reticent to speak on the record, citing concerns about privacy or potential repercussions. Some reported vague recollections of increased heavy truck traffic on remote access roads years ago, or occasional unusual vibrations or low-frequency sounds, but nothing concrete they could definitively link to underground construction. Many were simply used to the presence of nearby military installations and restricted areas and didn't question unusual activity in remote zones. The culture of discretion surrounding existing military facilities in the region seemed to extend to this suspected new site, either by design or through long-standing habit. Attempts were made to find evidence of the logistical footprint such a massive project would require. Where did the millions of tons of excavated rock go? Where did the construction materials come from? Analysts scoured records for unusual spikes in concrete, steel, or specialized equipment, purchases delivered to the region that weren't tied to public infrastructure projects. They looked for increased activity at nearby railheads or airfields capable of handling heavy cargo. While some minor anomalies were noted, there was no obvious, large-scale logistical footprint visible in the public record, suggesting either extraordinary measures of concealment, egregious internal processing of materials, transport using military assets under false manifests, or that some aspects of the scale were overestimated. This part of the investigation highlighted the effectiveness of the secrecy surrounding the project. The estimated cost of a facility of the inferred size and depth was a major point of discussion. Experts in large-scale tunneling and underground construction estimated the cost would run into the tens, possibly even hundreds, of billions of dollars over the 2 decades of apparent construction. To put this in perspective, this would rival or exceed the cost of major historical projects like the initial Apollo program, adjusted for inflation, or the development of entirely new classes of warships or aircraft. Funding a project of this magnitude entirely within classified budgets or off-budget accounts would require a significant portion of the US government's discretionary spending to be hidden from public view and standard congressional oversight. This fiscal aspect of the potential base was as alarming to some as its existence and purpose, raising serious questions about the health of democratic accountability when such vast sums could be spent in total secrecy. The Project Chimera leak, whether a genuine whistleblower action, a hack, or something else, had clearly struck a nerve. The government's reaction wasn't just silence. There were reports within cybersecurity circles of increased activity targeting individuals and groups known to be analyzing and disseminating the leaked data. This digital pressure, alongside the official stonewalling, reinforced the perception that the information was highly sensitive and credible. It wasn't just noise. It was information the government actively wanted to suppress. The narrative was shifting from, "Is this real?" to, "What is so important here that they would spend decades and billions building it in secret and go to such lengths to keep it hidden?" The focus expanded from simply verifying the satellite images to understanding the potential strategic landscape that necessitated such an extreme and costly measure. The existence of a hidden military base beneath the Rockies, whether confirmed in detail or not, was no longer just a fringe theory. It was a subject of serious investigation, fueled by compelling, albeit circumstantial, evidence and the undeniable reality of government secrecy. Delving deeper into the technical aspects of the anomalies identified by Project Chimera and subsequently corroborated by independent analysis, the picture of the potential underground facility began to take more concrete, albeit still inferred, shape. The thermal signatures, for instance, weren't just random hotspots. Analysis over time suggested they often appeared in clusters or sequences, potentially indicating the activation of different sections of a large ventilation system. The pattern of heat dissipation into the surrounding rock and atmosphere, when modeled, was consistent with large-scale heat loads originating from significant depth. Sources like powerful data centers, industrial machinery, or extensive life support systems for a large number of personnel. The geological context of the specific location became crucial. The suspected site lies within a mountain range known for its Precambrian granite and metamorphic rock formations. These types of rock are extremely hard and stable, offering excellent protection against seismic activity and kinetic impact. However, they are also incredibly difficult and expensive to tunnel through. Modern tunnel boring machines, TBMs, capable of handling such hard rock are massive, require immense power, and generate significant heat and excavated material. The timeline of apparent construction, late 90s to 2010s, aligns with advancements in hard rock TBM technology. The scale of the excavation implied by the analysis suggested the use of multiple large TBMs operating concurrently or in sequence over many years. This reinforced the sheer logistical and engineering challenge, and thus the immense cost of the project. Analysis of the multispectral data leaked by Project Chimera and partially confirmed by independent sources pointed to anomalies consistent with specific types of concrete and potentially shielding materials. High-density concrete, often incorporating heavy aggregates like barite or magnetite, is used for radiation shielding in nuclear facilities or secure bunkers. Traces of elements associated with specialized metals used in electromagnetic shielding or structural reinforcement were also reported. while the leaked data's interpretation of these elements couldn't be fully verified without access to the raw spectral data and detailed geological maps. The presence of unusual material compositions in the area, inconsistent with surface geology, added another layer to the evidence. The potential power requirements for a facility of this scale were staggering. A deep underground complex housing command centers, data storage, or research labs would require massive amounts of electricity for life support, computing, environmental controls, lighting, and internal transportation systems. Analysis of the regional power grid didn't show any obvious, publicly declared connections to a new, massive consumer in the specific remote area. This suggested several possibilities. Any of these options would represent a significant and expensive piece of infrastructure, adding to the estimated overall cost and complexity of the project. The layout and potential function of the facility could only be inferred from the spatial distribution of the detected anomalies. Clusters of thermal signatures might indicate different operational zones or ventilation shafts. Areas of subtle ground subsidence over time could point to the location of massive underground caverns or levels. The possible reinforced access road suggested a primary surface entry point, likely heavily secured and camouflaged. The Project Chimera analysis speculated on a multi-level structure, potentially extending over 1,000 feet below the surface, with different sections dedicated to specific functions, perhaps command, data, research, and life support. The sheer volume estimates suggested not just a bunker, but a self-sustaining, long-term operational complex. The discussion about the potential purpose of the base became more specific, tied to the technical analysis. The combination of extreme depth, apparent shielding materials, and massive data power requirements strongly pointed towards a function related to surviving and operating through a catastrophic event. A nuclear war scenario was the most obvious historical context, but the time frame of construction, post-Cold War peak, also suggested preparedness for newer threats. Massive cyber attacks capable of crippling infrastructure, novel biological or chemical attacks, or even large-scale civil unrest or geopolitical collapse that could threaten central authority. A secure data haven in this context would protect not just military secrets, but potentially the digital infrastructure required to rebuild or maintain control in a post-catastrophe world. An R&D function could be related to developing countermeasures for these exact threats in a secure environment. The absence of public contracts for waste removal was a particularly puzzling aspect. Excavating millions of tons of rock underground requires a plan for dealing with the spoil. Unless the material was processed within the mountain or transported under extreme security measures, there should be a detectable signature of its disposal. This missing piece of the puzzle led to speculation about highly innovative or highly secretive methods of material handling. Perhaps the material was crushed and used as fill or aggregate within the underground structures themselves, reducing the amount needing to be removed externally. Or perhaps it was removed in small, undetectable increments over decades and integrated into existing, unrelated material streams, e.g., mixed with road construction aggregate far away. The picture emerging from the technical analysis and independent verification was of a project of almost unimaginable scale, complexity, and cost, built with extreme secrecy in mind. Every anomaly, every piece of circumstantial evidence pointed towards a singular conclusion: a vast, deep underground facility built for a purpose deemed critical enough to warrant decades of hidden work and billions in secret funding. While the exact function remained speculative, the technical signatures were consistent with a hardened, self-sufficient complex designed for long-term operation under duress. The question was no longer if something was under that mountain, but what and why. It was kept hidden at such immense cost. The government's continued silence, juxtaposed with the mounting technical evidence, only deepened the mystery and amplified the public's demand for answers about the secrets buried beneath the Rockies. The political dimension of the alleged base quickly escalated beyond online forums and niche investigations. As independent analyses gained traction and were reported by more prominent alternative news outlets, mainstream media largely remained cautious, citing the lack of official confirmation. Pressure began to mount on elected officials. Congressional representatives from Colorado and neighboring states were asked about the claims. Their responses mirrored the executive branch, either expressing ignorance, stating they would look into it, or deferring to national security agencies. This lack of awareness among ostensibly oversight bodies further highlighted the potential bypass of standard democratic processes. Was this project so compartmentalized that even relevant members of Congress were kept in the dark? Or were they aware but unwilling to disclose classified information? The debate surrounding the base became a proxy for broader discussions about government secrecy, accountability, and the balance between national security and democratic oversight. Critics argued that funding and constructing a facility costing tens or hundreds of billions of dollars over decades without any public knowledge or congressional debate represented a profound failure of governance and a potential abuse of power. They questioned what kind of threats could justify such extreme measures and why the public couldn't be trusted with even the general knowledge of such preparedness, even if the specific functions remained classified. Proponents of secrecy, often speaking anonymously or through defense think tanks, argued that the nature of the threats the facility was designed to counter, be it nuclear, cyber, or otherwise existential, necessitated absolute secrecy to ensure its effectiveness and survivability. Public knowledge, they claimed, would compromise the location, purpose, and operational security of the base, rendering the multi-billion-dollar investment moot and potentially endangering national security. They argued that certain programs, critical for the survival of the nation, require a level of discretion beyond standard oversight mechanisms, relying instead on internal executive branch controls and specific, highly compartmentalized congressional committees. The lack of a clear, undeniable photographic image of the base itself remained a key factor preventing the story from dominating mainstream headlines. Satellite images showed anomalies, ground disturbances, and indirect evidence, but not a clear view of an entrance or structure that couldn't, in theory, be explained away. This allowed official sources to maintain their stance of denial or ambiguity, framing the evidence as circumstantial and open to interpretation by those predisposed to conspiracy theories. However, the volume and consistency of the circumstantial evidence, coupled with the intense secrecy surrounding the area and the government's reaction, made dismissing the claims outright increasingly difficult for objective observers. The Project Chimera source remained silent after the initial data dump, adding another layer of mystery. Who were they? A disgruntled insider? A hacker group? A foreign intelligence operation attempting to sow distrust? Without further communication or additional leaks, their identity and motives remained unknown, allowing critics to potentially discredit the information based on the anonymity of the source. However, the technical depth and apparent legitimacy of the data analysis provided in the leak suggested a source with significant technical expertise and access to either classified information or highly sophisticated analysis tools. The alleged base also sparked debate about the strategic landscape of the early 21st century. Why build such a facility? Then, the period of apparent construction coincided with the rise of asymmetric threats, global terrorism, the increasing reliance on digital infrastructure, and the proliferation of cyber warfare capabilities among state and non-state actors. It also spanned periods of significant geopolitical tension and shifts in the global balance of power. The facility's purpose was likely tied to these evolving threats, perhaps focusing on resilience against non-conventional attacks, or serving as a secure hub for operations in a world where surface infrastructure was vulnerable. The discussion extended to the potential impact on the environment and local geology. Building a facility of this scale underground would inevitably have some impact, even if minimized. Seismic monitoring data, while showing unusual patterns, didn't indicate activity large enough to suggest deliberate triggering of earthquakes. However, the potential for long-term geological stress or alteration remained a theoretical concern, largely unaddressable without more specific data on the base's structure and depth. Environmental impact statements for government projects, if they existed for this facility, were clearly not in the public domain. As the story circulated, it highlighted the limitations of open-source intelligence, despite its increasing sophistication. OSINT could raise compelling questions, identify anomalies, and build a strong circumstantial case, but it often lacked the definitive proof. Internal documents, eyewitness testimony from insiders, or clear photographic evidence that would be required to force official acknowledgement or a full public inquiry. The hidden military base beneath the Rockies remained, for now, a deeply plausible but officially unconfirmed mega-project, shrouded in layers of secrecy, its existence supported by technical whispers from orbit and the loud silence of the government. The debate over its purpose and the implications of its hidden construction continued to unfold, a modern mystery playing out in the digital age. The sheer technical undertaking implied by the satellite data analysis became a focus for engineering and construction experts examining the claims. Building a multi-level facility hundreds or thousands of feet underground in solid granite is a monumental task. It requires not just tunneling, but the creation of vast underground caverns capable of housing infrastructure, personnel, and equipment. The stability of such caverns at depth is paramount and requires advanced structural engineering, including extensive rock bolting, lining, and potentially sophisticated stress monitoring systems. The volume of concrete and steel required for the internal structures and shielding would be immense. Estimates based on inferred cavern sizes and potential depth put the total excavated volume easily in the millions of cubic meters, possibly exceeding 10 or 20 million. To put this in perspective, this is comparable to the material moved for major civil engineering projects like large highway interchanges or dam foundations. The logistical challenge of transporting this material out of a remote mountain location, even over 2 decades, without leaving a significant public trace, continued to baffle analysts. It reinforced the idea of either internal processing use of the spoil or extraordinary clandestine transport operations using military assets or highly controlled private contractors sworn to secrecy. The implied infrastructure within the base also spoke to its potential function. A facility designed for long-term occupation or operation during a crisis would need independent life support systems, air filtration and circulation, water purification, waste management, and possibly even internal food production capabilities. The thermal anomalies could partly be related to the power-hungry environmental control systems needed to maintain a stable, habitable environment deep underground, as well as the heat generated by extensive computing or machinery. The security measures for such a facility were also speculated upon. Beyond the natural protection of the mountain, surface access points would be heavily fortified and camouflaged. The single apparent reinforced road leading to the area suggested a primary vehicle entrance, likely controlled by blast doors or other hardened entry systems hidden within the landscape. There might also be vertical access shafts for personnel or specialized equipment, possibly accessed via helicopter pads or small clandestine surface structures disguised as utility buildings or geological survey stations. The security perimeter around the area, even if not physically marked, would likely be monitored with advanced sensors, seismic, acoustic, thermal, and motion detectors, making unauthorized approach extremely difficult. The lack of public access or recreational trails in the immediate vicinity, combined with the avoidance of air traffic, further supported the notion of a highly secure and restricted zone extending well beyond any visible fence line. Discussions among military strategists and defense analysts, largely off the record due to the sensitive nature of the topic and lack of official confirmation, touched upon the strategic rationale for investing such massive resources in a hardened underground facility in the post-Cold War era. While the threat of full-scale nuclear war diminished after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the proliferation of nuclear weapons to other states, the rise of sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities capable of disrupting critical infrastructure, and the potential for future unconventional attacks remained significant concerns. A deep underground base offers unparalleled resilience against these threats compared to surface facilities, even those that are hardened. It provides a secure location for command and control, intelligence analysis, strategic planning, or critical research that could continue operation during or after a devastating attack on surface assets. Some analysts speculated the facility could be linked to specific, highly sensitive programs, perhaps related to cyber offense defense, quantum computing research for decryption or secure communication, or even advanced weaponry research, again, within plausible technological bounds, not sci-fi fantasy. A deeply buried facility offers not just protection but also isolation, mitigating risks of espionage, electromagnetic interference, or accidental exposure of dangerous materials or technologies. The long construction timeline might reflect the gradual development and integration of cutting-edge systems and capabilities as threats evolved. The political implications of funding this project in secret were significant. The US defense budget includes classified sections, often referred to as the black budget, for highly sensitive programs. However, a project of this scale, spanning 2 decades and potentially costing tens or hundreds of billions, would represent a substantial portion of even the black budget. This level of hidden spending raises profound questions about the transparency of defense spending, the oversight capabilities of Congress, even the intelligence committees, and the potential for unchecked power within the executive or military branches. It suggests a level of compartmentalization and secrecy arguably unprecedented for a domestic infrastructure project. The ongoing lack of official acknowledgement or denial, combined with the apparent efforts to suppress information about the leak and the site, reinforced the perception that the government had something significant to hide. This further eroded public trust and fueled speculation, often drifting into less plausible territory simply because the credible information was so scarce and the official response so opaque. The hidden military base beneath the Rockies became a powerful symbol of government secrecy and the public's limited insight into the most sensitive aspects of national security strategy and spending. The technical evidence painted a compelling picture of a vast, expensive, and purpose-built underground complex, but without official word or irrefutable visual proof. Its exact nature and strategic role remained a subject of intense, technically informed speculation and growing public concern. The debates surrounding the hidden base began to influence broader conversations about national preparedness and strategic infrastructure. If the US government was indeed building such a massive, deeply buried facility, what threats were they anticipating that necessitated this level of investment and secrecy? Was the public being adequately informed about the true nature of the dangers facing the nation? The potential existence of the base served as a stark indicator that, behind the public face of defense strategy, there might be a much more severe assessment of potential catastrophic events driving monumental, hidden projects. The estimated cost of the base, even based on conservative engineering estimates for underground construction of that scale, meant that enormous resources had been diverted from other potential uses: public infrastructure, social programs, or even other, more publicly acknowledged defense projects. This fiscal implication fueled criticism especially among those who questioned the priorities of government spending. Was an ultra-hardened, deep underground base the most effective way to spend billions to protect the nation in the 21st century? Or did it represent an outdated strategic concept from a different era, executed in secret? The secrecy surrounding the project also raised questions about accountability for potential problems or cost overruns. With no public contracts, no environmental impact statements in the public domain, and no apparent external oversight body aware of the project, who was responsible for ensuring it was built effectively, on budget, and safely? The potential for waste, fraud, or technical failures in a project of this scale and secrecy was significant. The Project Chimera data leak provided no insight into the internal management or execution of the project, only the external evidence of its apparent existence and scale. The geological characteristics of the specific suspected location became a recurring theme in discussions. While hard granite offers protection, it also presents challenges related to groundwater management, ventilation over long distances, and maintaining structural integrity in a high-stress environment at great depth. The technical solutions to these problems are complex and expensive, further contributing to the estimated cost and engineering difficulty of the project. Analysts speculated about the methods used to handle water ingress, the design of air circulation systems capable of supporting personnel and equipment deep underground, and the potential for seismic activity, even in a stable area, requiring sophisticated dampening or structural reinforcement. The apparent multi-decade construction timeline, late 1990s to late 2010s, suggested a phased approach. This could mean different sections of the base were completed and potentially made operational at different times, or that the scope of the project expanded over the years in response to evolving strategic assessments. A phased approach would also allow for lessons learned during earlier stages of construction to be applied to later stages, potentially optimizing methods for hard rock excavation and underground construction. It also meant that multiple administrations, across different political parties, would have overseen the project, implying a bipartisan consensus on the necessity of such a facility, at least within the highest levels of national security decision-making. The leak also highlighted the capabilities and limitations of modern satellite technology and open-source intelligence. While satellites can detect subtle thermal anomalies, ground disturbances, and changes over time, they often cannot penetrate deep underground or provide the kind of definitive visual evidence that would remove all doubt. OSINT analysis, while powerful in aggregating and interpreting publicly available or leaked data, ultimately relies on the quality and completeness of that data and the expertise of the analysts. It can build a strong circumstantial case, but faces inherent limitations when confronted with determined state-level secrecy. The government's continued strategy of silence and investigation into the leak itself, rather than addressing the substance of the claims, was a key factor in sustaining the mystery and fueling public distrust. This approach, while perhaps effective in preventing the disclosure of classified details, was counterproductive in alleviating public concern about hidden projects and secret spending. The more the government appeared to be actively suppressing information, the more credible the claims of a massive secret base became in the eyes of many observers. The concept of a hidden city or a deep underground refuge captured the public imagination, tapping into both fears of future catastrophes and distrust of authority. While the technical evidence pointed towards a highly functional, strategic military facility, rather than a civilian fallout shelter or a mythical underground metropolis, the popular perception often conflated these ideas. This added another layer of complexity to the public discourse surrounding the base, mixing serious analysis with more speculative or conspiratorial narratives. The hidden military base beneath the Rockies remained a potent, if elusive, symbol, a testament to the lengths a nation might go to prepare for the worst. and the profound questions raised when those preparations are conducted entirely outside the public eye. The geographical placement of the suspected base within the Rocky Mountain range added layers of strategic and logistical significance. The Rockies provide immense natural shielding from direct attack, particularly against nuclear weapons, due to the sheer mass of rock above. This protection extends beyond kinetic impact to electromagnetic pulse, EMP effects, which are significantly attenuated underground. The geological stability of the region also makes it less prone to major earthquakes compared to fault zones. This aligns with the probable function of a facility designed to survive a catastrophic event. Logistically, however, a mountain location presents significant challenges. Transporting materials, equipment, and personnel to and from a remote site, and particularly managing the removal of excavated spoil, is exponentially more difficult than building in a more accessible area. The analysis suggesting deep underground placement implies limited, highly secured surface access points, further complicating logistics. This again reinforces the inference that the strategic benefits of the location and depth, namely survivability and security, were deemed worth the immense logistical difficulty and cost. The timeline of construction, purportedly spanning from the late 1990s through the late 2010s, is significant. The late 90s saw increased focus on Y2K preparedness, which, while often ridiculed in hindsight, did prompt infrastructure reviews. More importantly, this period included the lead-up to and aftermath of 9/11, the subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the growing awareness of cyber threats and the potential for asymmetric attacks on US soil. This was also a time of rapid technological advancement, particularly in computing, networking, and secure communications. The facility's development likely evolved alongside these changing threat landscapes and technological capabilities. It's plausible that the initial concept focused more on nuclear survivability, while later phases incorporated capabilities related to cyber warfare, secure data management, and continuity of government in a wider range of scenarios. The potential scale of operations within the base also warrants consideration. A multi-square mile underground complex could house thousands of personnel potentially operating in shifts, maintaining life support, power, communications, and operational tempo for such a population, possibly for extended periods, requires vast internal infrastructure and supplies. The logistics of staffing and supplying such a facility, again, without leaving a public trace, point to highly controlled access and likely internal storage capacities for consumables and critical spares. The Project Chimera leak didn't specify any particular military branch or government agency as the primary occupant or builder of the base. Speculation ranged from a Joint Forces Command Center, a National Security Agency, NSA, data storage and processing facility, a National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, Command Center, or even a multi-agency continuity of government complex. The broad nature of the potential functions, command, data, R&D, survival, could fit several different governmental entities, or perhaps a combination operating under a unified command structure specifically created for the facility. The proximity to NORAD Northcom headquarters in Colorado Springs led some to speculate on a connection, perhaps as a backup or expansion site, though the suspected location is significantly further west and deeper within the mountains than the Cheyenne mountain complex. The government's consistent strategy of neither confirming nor denying a neither confirm nor deny or gravel amendment type of response, while simultaneously taking action against the leak, was a clear indicator of the information's sensitivity. This approach is typically reserved for highly classified programs whose public acknowledgement would genuinely harm national security. The The fact that evidence of physical construction prompted this level of official response suggested the facility itself, not just its specific function, was considered a deeply held secret. The lack of a definitive, universally accepted explanation for the satellite anomalies from official sources allowed the narrative space to be filled with speculation, both informed and otherwise. While OSINT analysts focused on plausible military government functions, others ventured into theories involving extraterrestrial technology, secret space programs, or other highly speculative concepts. The government's information vacuum inadvertently empowered these fringe theories by failing to provide any credible alternative explanation for the compelling, if circumstantial, evidence of large-scale clandestine underground activity. The hidden military base beneath the Rockies became more than just a story about a potential secret facility. It evolved into a case study in the age of digital leaks, open-source intelligence, and government transparency, or lack thereof. It demonstrated how publicly available data, when combined with leaked information and sophisticated analysis, could reveal hints of projects intended to remain completely hidden. It also demonstrated the immense power of state-level secrecy and the difficulty of definitively proving the existence and nature of such projects without direct access to classified information or official acknowledgement. As long as the mountain held its secrets and the government maintained its silence, the questions would persist, and the image of a vast, hidden complex beneath the rock would remain a potent symbol of the secrets buried beneath the surface of national security. The environmental implications of a project of this magnitude, while difficult to assess without specific data, remained a concern for those examining the alleged base. Excavating millions of tons of rock and operating a large facility underground would inevitably interact with the local hydrology. Underground water flows could be disrupted, potentially affecting surface streams or groundwater tables. The disposal of excavated material, if not processed internally, would require vast concealed disposal sites or transport pathways. The energy demands of the facility could also place a strain on regional power resources, even if partially offset by an internal power source. While the area is remote, ecological impacts, even indirect ones, over a period of 2 decades of construction and potential ongoing operation would be difficult to entirely avoid. Furthermore, the safety of personnel working on or within such a deep underground facility, especially during construction in challenging geological conditions, would be a significant consideration. Accidents in underground construction, particularly tunneling in hard rock, can be severe. The lack of any public record of accidents, injuries, or fatalities associated with a project of this scale in the area over such a long period also points to the extreme secrecy. If accidents occurred, they were likely handled internally and kept entirely off the public record, possibly involving military medical facilities rather than civilian hospitals. This level of control over information related to safety incidents would be consistent with a black project of the highest classification. The economic impact on the local region, despite the remoteness, is another area that might hold clues. While the project was clandestine, its sheer scale would require supplies, potentially labor, even if highly specialized and brought in from outside the area, and perhaps some level of support services. Yet, analysis of local economic data, building permits, or population changes in the nearest small towns showed no significant, unexplained boom or activity spike during the construction period that couldn't be attributed to other regional factors like seasonal tourism or mining fluctuations, though large-scale mining was not prevalent in the immediate suspected area. This again underscored the effectiveness of the secrecy and compartmentalization. The project appeared to have existed as an economic island, disconnected from the local civilian economy as much as possible. The potential for future expansion of the facility or the existence of other connected clandestine sites was also a subject of speculation. Given the multi-decade construction timeline and the evolving threat landscape, The base might have been designed with future growth in mind. The analysis of satellite imagery over time might only show completed or partially completed sections, with the potential for further tunneling or expansion ongoing or planned. Similarly, a large central base might be supported by smaller, dispersed satellite facilities or access points kilometers away, connected by underground tunnels or highly secure surface routes. The leaked data provided no definitive evidence of this, but the possibility remained open given the apparent scale and strategic importance. The Project Chimera leak, while providing compelling circumstantial evidence, ultimately left many fundamental questions unanswered. The most critical among these was the precise purpose of the base. While command and control, data haven, or R&D were plausible categories, the specific nature of the operations remained unknown. Was it primarily for surviving a nuclear attack, managing a global cyber war, developing exotic defensive or offensive capabilities? Its specific function would define its true strategic value and the perceived threats that justified its existence and secrecy. Another major unanswered question was the chain of command and oversight for such a project. Who authorized it? Who funded it? Which individuals or entities were ultimately responsible for its construction and operation? Without this information, accountability for the project's costs, secrecy, and potential implications for democratic governance remained elusive. The lack of transparency at this fundamental level was a key source of concern for critics. Finally, the question of long-term public knowledge remained. Could a facility of this scale, requiring ongoing maintenance and staffing, remain secret indefinitely? Or was the leak a catalyst that would eventually force some level of official acknowledgement or disclosure? The government's response suggested a strong commitment to maintaining secrecy, but the genie of information, once released, is difficult to put back in the bottle. The hidden military base beneath the Rockies, while physically buried, was now a known entity in the digital realm, its existence a subject of persistent inquiry and debate. The mountain kept its silence. The government kept its secrets. But the satellite images had sparked a firestorm of questions that would not easily be extinguished. The story wasn't over. It had only moved from the shadows of absolute secrecy into the uncertain light of plausible deniancy and public investigation. The narrative of the hidden military base beneath the Rockies, pieced together from leaked satellite data and independent analysis, painted a picture of a massive, multi-decade undertaking executed in near total secrecy. While no single piece of evidence offered irrefutable proof of the base's exact nature or purpose, the confluence of anomalies, the consistent thermal signatures, inconsistent with natural phenomena, the subtle ground disturbances visible over time, the indications of heavy clandestine construction activity, the unusual material compositions, and the peculiar patterns in air and potentially seismic traffic, built a powerful circumstantial case for the existence of a large, deep underground facility in a highly restricted area. The government's reaction, or lack thereof, further solidified this case in the eyes of many. The standard no comment, the focus on investigating the source of the leak rather than the leaked content, the blanket denials of FOIA requests related to the area, and the reported increased cybersecurity activity targeting those discussing the data, all pointed to a program of extreme sensitivity that the authorities were desperate to keep under wraps. This response, while predictable for a highly classified project, was counterproductive in maintaining public trust once the initial evidence had surfaced. It confirmed for many that the information was indeed credible and that there was something significant being hidden. The estimated cost of the project, running into the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, underscored its perceived strategic importance. Such a colossal investment, hidden from public budgets and democratic oversight, suggested a purpose tied to the highest levels of national security and long-term strategic planning, likely related to surviving and operating during or after a catastrophic event. The time frame of construction, spanning 2 decades and multiple administrations, indicated a consistent, bipartisan commitment to this hidden project, regardless of the political shifts in Washington. The technical challenges of building and operating such a deep underground facility in the hard rock of the Rockies highlighted the extraordinary engineering and logistical capabilities required. Excavating millions of tons of rock, managing subterranean environments, providing power and life support for a large population, and ensuring security and connectivity from hundreds of feet below the surface were feats of engineering that demanded cutting-edge technology and immense resources. The apparent success in minimizing detectable surface impact and economic footprint over 2 decades spoke volumes about the level of planning, execution, and secrecy involved. The Project Chimera leak exposed the vulnerabilities inherent even in the most secure and compartmentalized projects in the age of digital information. While the source remained anonymous and their motives unclear, the fact that technical data suggesting the base's existence could be obtained and disseminated demonstrated that complete, impenetrable secrecy is an increasingly difficult, if not impossible, standard to maintain in the modern era. Ultimately, the hidden military base beneath the Rockies remained a puzzle, a compelling mystery supported by technical evidence and official silence, but lacking the definitive, unassailable proof that would satisfy all skeptics or force a full public accounting. Its existence, as inferred from the data, raised profound questions about government transparency, the scale of secret spending, the nature of perceived threats driving national security strategy, and the balance between necessary secrecy and democratic accountability. The mountain continued to stand, guarding its secrets beneath layers of rock and layers of classification. The satellite images had offered a glimpse, a whisper of the immense project hidden within, but the full story, its precise purpose, its operational capabilities, its human cost, and its true strategic significance, remained buried, awaiting future leaks, investigations, or perhaps, in a world profoundly changed, eventual disclosure. The quiet mountain held its breath, and the digital world watched, waiting for the next sign of the secrets hidden beneath. The final unresolved layer of the hidden military base beneath the Rockies saga concerned its status in the present day. Was the facility completed by the late 2010s, as the historical satellite analysis suggested the bulk of the construction activity tapered off? Was it fully operational? Was it staffed? Or was it placed on standby, a strategic asset waiting for a crisis that might necessitate its full activation? The leaked data provided insight into the construction phase, but offered little about the current operational status of the facility. Ongoing independent monitoring of the suspected location using publicly available satellite data continued after the initial leak. Analysts looked for renewed thermal anomalies, subtle ground surface changes indicative of ongoing activity, or changes in access road usage patterns. While occasional faint signals were still detected, they seemed less intense and frequent than those observed during the peak construction period. This could indicate that the base was operating in a low power or maintenance mode, or that operational secrecy measures were even more effective than during construction. The question of staffing was also intriguing. A facility of this presumed size and complexity would require a significant number of highly specialized personnel, including engineers, technicians, security staff, and potentially operational command personnel. How were these individuals recruited, vetted, and potentially relocated without raising suspicion? Were they drawn from existing, highly cleared military or civilian government personnel? Were they required to sign extraordinary non-disclosure agreements? The logistics of maintaining a potentially large workforce in a remote, secret location presented ongoing challenges that would leave some form of trace however faint, in the broader system, traces that independent investigators struggle to find in publicly accessible records. The long-term strategic relevance of the base in the 2020s also came into question. While designed to counter threats prevalent during its construction period, had the strategic landscape shifted in ways that made the base less critical, or perhaps more so? The rise of advanced AI, hypersonic weapons, sophisticated space-based threats, and evolving geopolitical alliances could alter the strategic value of a deep underground command and control center or data haven. Was the base a relic of past threat perceptions? Or had its capabilities been updated to remain relevant in the current strategic environment? The possibility of the facility being part of a larger, interconnected network of secret sites was also considered. Could the base in the Rockies be linked, perhaps via secure underground fiber optic cables or other means, to other highly classified facilities across the country or even globally? The sheer scale of the project suggested it was unlikely to be a standalone effort, but rather a critical node in a broader, hidden strategic architecture. However, finding evidence of such connections through open-source means proved even more challenging than identifying the base itself. The Project Chimera leak and the subsequent investigation served as a stark reminder of the limitations of democratic oversight when confronted with deeply compartmentalized, highly classified programs funded through opaque means. The mechanisms designed to ensure transparency and accountability, congressional committees, public budgets, FOIA, appeared to be effectively bypassed for this project. This raised fundamental questions about the health of democratic institutions and the extent to which major strategic decisions and massive expenditures can be made and executed outside the knowledge or consent of the public and their elected representatives. As time passed since the initial leak, the intense public and media focus on the hidden military base beneath the Rockies gradually subsided, replaced by newer headlines and crises. However, within the OSINT community and among dedicated investigative journalists, the case remained open. The data was still there. The anomalies persisted in historical imagery, and the government's silence remained unbroken. The mountain continued to hold its secrets, a silent monument to a project of immense scale and secrecy. The legacy of the Project Chimera leak was not necessarily definitive proof of the base's function, but rather the undeniable evidence of a vast clandestine project built in secret, raising critical questions about trust, transparency, and the hidden costs of national security in the 21st century. The story of the base beneath the Rockies became a modern myth, grounded in tantalizing technical data and reinforced by the very efforts to keep it hidden. It served as a symbol of the unknown, the power wielded behind closed doors, and the enduring human desire to uncover the secrets buried beneath the surface, both geological and governmental.